He thought he was chasing love. But what he found in a remote African village left him drained, betrayed, and fearing for his freedom. A hopeful journey turned into a nightmare of secrets, lies, and a shocking escape you won't believe. Was it love or the perfect setup? If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's jump into the story. Graham Holloway lived a quiet life in a town that most people never noticed on a map. It was the kind of place where the streets were always clean. The neighbors nodded politely, and the birds outside sang the same tune every morning. After his wife, Anna, passed away 2 years ago, Graham's world shrank. The house they once filled with laughter now echoed with silence. At 64, retirement felt less like freedom and more like a slow drift into invisibility. Each morning, Graham brewed his tea, sat by the same kitchen window, and stared out at the hedges she once trimmed herself. He missed her deeply, not just her smile or the way she curled her toes under the blanket, but the simple rhythm of knowing someone was there. He had a daughter, Claire, who lived across the country with a busy job and even busier twins. She called when she could, but most days were quiet. One evening, unable to sleep, Graham found himself on the internet. He wasn't tech-savvy, but curiosity led him to a forum called Voices Across the World. It was a space where people from different countries shared stories, letters, and thoughts on life. No ads, no pop-ups, just writing from the heart. A post caught his eye. It was titled, "A Teacher's Hope," and written by someone named Layla Kamari. The post was short, but powerful. Layla described teaching children in a small village in Tanzania, where supplies were low, but dreams were high. She wrote about girls who walked miles to school, about her late father who believed in education, and about her hope to one day build a learning center just for girls. At the end of the post, she quoted a simple Swahili saying, "Elimu ni maisha." Education is the light of life. Graham read it twice, then again. Something about her words stayed with him. Maybe it was her honesty. Maybe it was the quiet strength behind her sentences. Or maybe he just needed to feel something again. He typed a reply before he could talk himself out of it. "Dear Layla, thank you for your beautiful post. I was touched by your passion for teaching. I used to be a librarian here in England, so I understand the power books can have. Your story reminded me of the reason I fell in love with learning and with life. Thank you for sharing it." He clicked send and expected nothing, but the next morning, her reply was waiting. "Dear Mr. Graham, thank you for your kind words. It means so much to know someone far away heard me. My students often ask what people in other countries think of them. I can now tell them that someone in England believes in them." From that message, something began. Day by day, letter by letter, Graham and Layla got to know each other, not like strangers, but like two people who had been waiting for the right voice to speak to. Layla told him stories about her village, how the market was full of color and music on Saturdays, how the power came and went like the wind, and how the children made kites out of newspaper and sticks. She wrote about the dry seasons, the way her mother still cooked over firewood, and how she saved a little money each week toward the school she wanted to build. Graham, in return, shared about the English countryside, his late wife's love of gardening, and how retirement wasn't what he imagined. He told her about a hedgehog that lived under his shed, and how the local postman still wore shorts even in the snow. Slowly, he opened up. In her letters, he felt seen again. Weeks turned to months. Their conversations became a daily habit. He'd wake, boil water for tea, and sit down to read her latest message. Her words were like sunshine on a gray morning. She never asked for anything, no money, no promises. Just time, just thoughts, just truth. Then one day, Layla wrote something different. "I wish you could see my village. I know it's not easy to imagine from letters, but I think you'd understand it better if you were here." She didn't ask him to come, not directly, But her words stirred something in him. Graham spent that evening pacing. The idea was crazy. He was an old man in a quiet English town. What business did he have flying across the world to meet someone he'd only known through a screen? But the thought didn't leave him. The next morning, he searched flights to Tanzania. Then local customs, then Swahili greetings. He scribbled things like karibu and asante sana in a notebook he hadn't used since Anna's funeral. Something was waking up in him. An old version of himself who used to believe that the world still held adventure. 2 weeks later, Graham booked his flight. 1 suitcase, passport, a guidebook, and the letters out as he zipped the bag shut. He looked around his quiet home one last time. He didn't know what waited for him across the sea. But he knew this much. He was no longer running from loneliness. He was moving towards something. Or someone. And that was enough to begin. The plane touched down in Dar es Salaam just after sunset, its wheels scraping the runway like a tired sigh. Graham Holloway leaned against the small window, his heart thudding like a slow drum. The warm air inside the cabin felt different from the cold gray skies of England he had left behind. It smelled of spice, sweat, and something sweet he couldn't quite name, maybe mango. Maybe hoped that he had flown over 4,000 miles for this moment. When the airport doors opened, a wave of heat wrapped around him like a thick, invisible blanket. It was heavy, but not unpleasant, just unfamiliar. He followed the line through customs, gripping the handle of his suitcase with a nervous hand. Then he saw her. Layla stood just beyond the exit doors, wearing a patterned dress the color of sunflowers. Her hair was braided, her smile was wide but shy. She held a small sign that read Mr. Graham in careful handwriting. For a moment, Graham froze. All those letters, all those stories, they had felt real. But now she was real. A living, breathing person. He approached slowly. She stepped forward and opened her arms. The hug was soft but sure, like meeting an old friend. "Welcome to Tanzania," she said, her voice warm and musical. "Thank you," he replied, suddenly aware of how dry his mouth was. Layla led him to a dusty white van waiting outside. A young man leaned against it, scrolling through his phone. "This is Salim," she said. "He'll drive us to Ukombozi." Graham blinked. "Tonight?" she smiled. "Yes, it's better to get there early. The village is quiet in the morning." They set off as the sky turned deep purple. The city lights faded behind them, replaced by long stretches of darkness. Streetlights became rare. Eventually, the road changed from pavement to gravel, and then from gravel to dirt. The drive lasted hours. Graham fought sleep, but couldn't stop his head from nodding. Every bump in the road jolted his spine. Occasionally, he'd open his eyes to find himself staring out into absolute blackness. No buildings, no signs, just land and sky. Salim drove in silence while Layla occasionally hummed softly in Swahili. At one point, Graham whispered, "How much farther?" "Not far," Layla said gently. "Maybe an hour more." He nodded, but his body was already aching. His back throbbed. His legs were stiff. He missed the soft bed in his guest house back in Dar. But this was what he signed up for, an adventure. A beginning. Finally, just after midnight, Salim slowed the van and turned off the engine. The night was still. A few distant dogs barked. In front of them stood a cluster of small homes made of mud bricks and corrugated tin. The moonlight made everything look silver and soft. "This is Ukombozi," Layla said. Graham stepped out of the van and immediately felt the uneven ground beneath his shoes. The air smelled like smoke and earth. He heard the sound of crickets, the soft bleating of a goat, and wind brushing through tall grass. Layla took his suitcase in one hand and his arm in the other. "Come," she said. "My home is just here." Her house was a single-room structure with a thatched roof and a wooden door that leaned slightly to one side. Inside, the walls were bare. A thin mattress lay on the floor with a faded blanket. A lantern flickered in the corner, casting shadows on the mud walls. There was no sink, no toilet, and no kitchen, just a kettle and a plastic bucket beside a tin bowl. "I know it's simple," she said, a little embarrassed. "But it's home." Graham managed a smile. "It's real. That's what matters." That night, he lay on the thin mattress with his jacket rolled under his head for a pillow. The mosquito net dangled loosely above him, but not enough to stop the buzzing in his ears. He was hot, his body ached. The ground beneath him felt like stone. And yet, he didn't sleep. He just listened to the frogs croaking outside, to the wind tapping the sides of the hut, to the sound of a distant drum, slow, steady, ancient. It was like the village had its own heartbeat. In the morning, he woke to the sound of chickens and children laughing in the distance. Layla brought him warm water in a metal bowl. "For washing," she said. They sat outside on overturned buckets, sipping tea made from leaves and boiled water. Breakfast was ugali, a soft white maize dish, and a small piece of fruit. After they ate, Layla handed him a yellow container. "For water," she said. "We go to the well." Graham stared at the container. "How far is it?" "About a mile. The children usually carry it, but they're at school today." The walk to the well was long. The sun was already high, and the path was rocky and uneven. Graham's shoes collected dust. His shirt clung to his back. He stopped often, breathless, his face red from heat. When they reached the well, two young girls giggled at the sight of him. "Is he your uncle?" one asked. "No," Leela said with a grin. "He's my friend, from far away." They walked back in silence. Graham carried the full water container with trembling arms. When they reached the house, he dropped it to the ground and sat heavily. "I'll get better at this," he muttered. By the second week in Ukombozi, Graham Holloway was no longer counting days. The sun rose early and hot. The chores came like clockwork, and each night ended with a sore back and buzzing mosquitoes. The romantic idea of village life had started to wear thin. He had come for love, for purpose, but now he wasn't sure what he had found. Layla still smiled at him every morning, but something felt different. The school project had started with excitement. They'd picked a plot of land just beyond the edge of the village. Graham gave the first payment to hire laborers and purchase materials. Layla introduced him to a builder named Kasim, a tall man with a serious face and a soft voice. He promised to get started immediately. But immediately came and went. The days stretched into each other. The pile of bricks stayed untouched. The timber remained where it had been dropped. When Graham asked, Layla would say, "They had a funeral," or "There's a delay with transport," or "It's just how things go here." Graham wanted to believe her. He did, but the more he asked, the more vague her answers became. The money kept leaving his account. First, it was for tools, then for permits, then for fabric to sew uniforms. Yet no one could show him a receipt. Every time he asked, Layla would look hurt, as if his questions were insults. "Do you not trust me, Graham?" she asked one evening, tears welling in her eyes. He hated how it made him feel, like he was the one causing harm. He apologized again, and told himself it was all part of the learning curve. Different country, different ways, but doubt was growing. One afternoon, a woman named Ruth visited the village. She was an aid worker, traveling through rural areas to check on local projects. She noticed Graham while he was sitting outside, trying to mend the sole of his shoe with string. "You're not from here," she said with a small smile. "No," he said. "Just helping someone I care about." They spoke for a while. Ruth was kind but sharp. When he mentioned the school project, her expression shifted slightly. "Just be careful," she said. "These things, they can get complicated." Graham nodded. He didn't know what she meant, but the words stayed with him. That night, Layla came home later than usual. Her clothes were clean, her hair freshly done, and she smelled faintly of perfume. Graham asked where she'd been. "To visit." "A cousin," she said quickly. "She's sick." He wanted to ask more, but didn't. He was tired of the tension, tired of feeling suspicious. So he smiled, nodded, and let it go. But the next day, he noticed something strange. Her tablet, left on the stool beside the bed, lit up with a message. Graham didn't mean to look, but his eyes caught a name he hadn't seen before: Jonas. The message said, "Missed you last night. Same place next week?" His heart sank. He stared at the screen, unsure what to do. After a moment, he put it down without saying a word. Later, he tried to bring it up gently. "Do you talk to anyone else online, Layla?" She looked up from stirring the pot. "What do you mean?" "Just curious," he said. "Sometimes I feel like I don't really know who else is in your life." Layla stiffened. "That's not fair," she said, her voice tight. "You came here because you said you believed in me. Why are you suddenly doubting me?" "I'm not," he lied. I don't want to be taken for a fool." Her face darkened. "If you feel that way, maybe you should go." The words cut like a blade. Graham said nothing. He went outside, sat under the mango tree, and watched the sky fade from gold to gray. That night, he barely slept. The mat beneath him felt harder than usual. The heat seemed to press into his skin like guilt. He kept hearing that message in his head: "Same place next week?" In the morning, Layla was gone before he woke up. No note. No message. He sat with Mama Usha, sipping tea in silence. She watched him carefully. Finally, she said in Swahili, "Too many gifts can blind a man." He didn't understand the words, but her tone said enough. Later that week, the builder didn't show up. Again, the materials that had been delivered were now warped from rain. Graham found 2 wooden beams split open, termites already crawling inside. Still, he tried to carry on. He hired a new worker, a quiet young man named Jabari, to help clear the land. But after 3 days, Jabari stopped coming. No word. No explanation. One evening, Graham stood in front of the half-cleared field, sweat dripping from his brow, and stared at what was supposed to be the start of something beautiful. Now, it just looked like a pile of broken promises. That night, Layla returned late again. When he asked where she'd been, she snapped, "Why are you always keeping track of me? I have a life here. You don't understand how hard this is." He didn't argue. He just nodded and went to bed. As he lay in the dark, the noise of the night seemed louder than usual. Frogs croaked, dogs barked. His stomach turned. He didn't know if it was the food, the heat, or the fear that maybe, just maybe, he had made a terrible mistake. The seeds of doubt had been planted. Now they were starting to grow. By the 4th week in Ukombozi, Graham Holloway no longer woke with hope. The mornings, once filled with new sights and the hum of village life, now felt heavy and silent. He had stopped asking about the school. He had stopped keeping track of the expenses. And most painfully, he had stopped believing in the dream that brought him here. Layla had changed. Or maybe, Graham thought, she had simply stopped pretending. She now came and went without explanation. Sometimes she smiled and brought him fruit or tea. Other times she barely looked at him. He no longer asked questions. He didn't have the strength for arguments. He moved through the days like a shadow, quiet, slow, and invisible. One morning, Graham sat by the hut's doorway, staring out across the dusty path. The school site still stood unfinished, just a few rusted metal poles and scattered wood planks. Chickens wandered through it now, scratching at the weeds. He hadn't seen a single worker in over a week. His back ached. His clothes hung loose. He had lost weight. The village children, once curious, now passed by without much interest. He was no longer a novelty. He was just the tired man who came from far away and didn't fit in. That evening, Layla returned just after dark. Her hair was freshly styled, and she wore a new dress he hadn't seen before. "Where have you been?" he asked gently. "Why? Does it matter?" she replied without meeting his eyes. "You're always here. What difference does it make?" Graham felt a chill run down his spine. "I just want to know the truth, Layla. That's all I ever wanted." She laughed a short, sharp sound. "The truth? You came here with your own story in mind. You wanted to be a savior, a hero, and I let you." Her words cut deep. Later that night, when she had fallen asleep, Graham sat in the dark and stared at the ceiling. He reached for her phone, which lay on the small stool beside her. His hands shook as he turned it on. There was no password. What he found confirmed every suspicion. Messages from another man, affectionate, flirty, full of private jokes and future plans. References to money, to the old guy, to waiting just a little longer. There were dozens of messages. Some sent just that day. Graham didn't cry. He didn't feel angry, not yet. What he felt was something else. A deep, cold stillness. The kind of silence that comes after a long, slow fall in the morning. He placed her phone on the table. "I saw the messages," he said. She didn't flinch. "So, I want to leave," he said. She smiled thinly. "Then go. But don't expect anything to change. You gave me money. You supported me, and now you want it back? That's not how this works." "I don't want the money," he said. "I just want to leave with what little I have left." She leaned in, her eyes suddenly sharp. "If you leave without my permission, I'll tell the authorities you hurt me. You'll be detained. You'll be stuck here for months, maybe longer. Do you understand?" Graham's heart pounded. He nodded. "I understand." But deep inside, something had changed. The fear had turned into resolve. He would not stay. Not one more day. That night, when Layla left again, he packed a small bag. Just the essentials. His passport, a change of clothes, his notebook, and the old paperback his late wife had once given him. The rest, he left behind. It no longer mattered. He walked silently through the village under the cover of darkness. His feet moved quickly, though his body ached with every step. The stars above were clear, like silent witnesses to his escape. At the edge of the village, a motorcycle waited. It was Tendo, a local man Graham had quietly asked for help 2 days before. Tendo didn't ask questions. He simply nodded and handed Graham a helmet. The ride to town was long and cold. The road was rough, but Graham didn't care. Every bump, every jolt was taking him closer to freedom. By dawn, they reached the small regional airport. Graham boarded a bus that would take him to the capital. From there, he had arranged a flight, using the last of his money to return home. The moment the plane lifted off the runway, Graham closed his eyes. He didn't know what waited for him back in England. But whatever it was, it had to be better than this. 3 weeks later, Graham sat in the sunlit kitchen of his friend Alan, who had offered him a room until he found his footing again. The English air was crisp and clean. The silence was familiar, but no longer painful. He was safe. He had lost money. He had lost trust, but not everything was gone. He still had his name, his freedom, his dignity. Bit by bit, Graham began rebuilding his life. He started volunteering at the local library again. He joined a walking group for retirees. And one day, he gave a small talk at the community center about being cautious with online relationships. He didn't tell them everything, but he told enough. He ended with this: "Sometimes we search for love so far away, we forget it's okay to first find peace with ourselves. I may have left a village behind, but I brought back a stronger version of me." And with that, Graham smiled for the first time in a long time, because the way back wasn't just about returning home. It was about finally finding it.